If you have an interesting ringtone, I can play a piece based on it. I don't know what So, shall we, I think it's 4, a little bit after 4, so we might begin in a little bit. Well, I talk, so if someone's late, it's okay. I talk a lot. But hello, this is a big group. Thank you for coming to listen. And I'm Robert Buxton. I'll play some classical piano for you and talk about the pieces. So, this program I'm doing right now is unusual. It's very unusual. And the story behind it is that when the pandemic started, which was a weird time for everybody, it's still sort of a thing, So I got really into violin music. I was listening to a lot of recordings of violinists, or as they call them around here, fiddle players, the same thing. So, and there's a documentary it's on YouTube. It's a PBS documentary called The Art of the Violin, which you should see. It's a beautiful thing. And it's, Jascha Heifetz, Nathan Milstein, Yehudi Menuhin, all these great violinists of the past. And I was so moved by watching this. I told my wife, who's a pianist also, I said, maybe I should switch to the violin. And she said, yeah, I know someone who did that from the piano. You can do it, but at your age, you just need about 15 hours of practice a day. And we had, at that time, a very young child. Now we have 2. So I said, well, I'm a little too lazy to do that. So the next best option would be to play violin pieces on the piano, solo. So that's what I'm going to do. That's what I'm doing. And these arrangements are by very good arrangers like Franz Liszt and Ferruccio Busoni. He was an Italian pianist and composer about 100 years ago. So that's what this program is comprised of, violin arrangements. So a word about arrangements. In music, arranging is like translating in literature. So if you have a book that's, by Balzac or someone in French, a good translator will not only make it make sense in English, but they will make the text idiomatic in English. Yeah? And that's what a good arranger does in music. They have to change things in the music. It's not a literal thing that what Bach wrote, for example, the first piece I'm going to play, is literally translated to the piano. That's not the case. So, the first piece is the Chaconne by Bach, Johann Sebastian Bach. This is the longest and heaviest piece I'll play for you today, so we will get that out of the way first. It's a very depressing piece. It's beautiful. So the Chaconne is for a solo violin. And the story behind it is that Bach would go on these long trips, walking trips. There were no cars at that time, to listen to other musicians. There were no recordings either, of course, in the early 18th century. And he came back from one of these long trips to find that his first wife had died. And he wrote this piece for the violin solo. And I would describe it as the stages of grief, which never come in a particular order, or the order can shift. But unfortunately, we all know what that is. We've all experienced that at some point in our lives. There is sadness, there's anger, there is acceptance. You've heard of this before. And that's what this music embodies, I think. So, it's for solo violin. Ferruccio Busoni, the Italian pianist and composer, he arranged this for piano. And it's almost like an organ-sounding piece, for a single violin, he expands the range of the notes of what the music is doing, adds all these bass notes and stuff. So the chaconne, one more thing about it, a chaconne it's a type of a dance, but it's not a cheerful dance by any means. It's a funeral-ish dance. It's a very dark mood. And its origins, like the saraband, are in Spain. Bach never went to Spain. He was from what's now Germany, but the origin of the chaconne or the chacona is Spanish and possibly even Latin American. There's a theory about that, but I don't know. So here's the chaconne by Bach, arranged by Busoni, and just like I said, it's a depressing and heavy piece. Thank you. I told you it was heavy. Need to get some water. I think a concert should be like a meal. I had a teacher who told me that. And well, I guess we didn't do appetizers today, but we had the steak, and then there's going to be some other shorter things I'll do. Okay, well, catch all our breaths here. It's a very, very deep piece. I mean, it's just, and if you hear it in the original version, it's very striking on a solitary violin. Brahms did an arrangement of this for the left hand alone, which I've looked at and it's exhausting. That's why I decided to do this. The Busoni's hard, but at least I get to use both hands. But Brahms said, in a letter to Clara Schumann, you know, they were close. I don't need to be People magazine or anything, but they were close. But Brahms wrote in a letter to Clara Schumann that he said that this piece, the Chaconne, it's all on a single line of music for the violin, just one ledger, you know, stave or whatever. He said if that music had been in my head, I would have gone mad as a composer. So, yeah. Okay, let me get some of this water and then we'll go on. Next, we're going to tackle some Paganini. So, Paganini was a composer and violinist at the end of the 18th century. And he's unique because his style is his own. He didn't come from any school, really. Other composers, you know, you can trace their style lineage back. Bach's children, for example, they learned from their father. So did Mozart learn from his father. But Paganini was sui generis. And the violinist Ivry Gitlis, actually he's my favorite, and I dedicate this whole program to him, really. He's the big inspiration for it. But Ivry Gitlis called Paganini the Big Bang in music. That he said, well, Bach was one, of course, but he said Paganini was a sort of a big bang in music. And I think there's a lot of truth to that. He was almost like a rock star in today's context. And he played in a manner that was so exhilarating that some people were scared of him. Some people thought he was possessed, actually. So, of course, let's go a little later in history to the 1830s, around the time he died. I think he died in like 1829 or something. But around this time, the young Franz Liszt was living in Paris. And Liszt was actually at a low point in his life. As a child, he had been sort of a prodigy, but he was in Paris at the beginning, he was really not, things were not going well for his professional life and his personal life. So he heard Paganini perform on the violin, and he was so inspired that the story goes that he locked himself in a room for a few years, practiced incessantly while reading literature, became also an educated man, and he emerged as Franz Liszt. It's an incredible story. It's almost like the Rocky Balboa movies, if you've seen, you know, a little bit. So Liszt, one of the first things he did was he arranged Paganini's violin music for the piano to emulate what Paganini did on the violin, on the piano. So I'll play a couple of these arrangements. This first one, my wife thinks it's a very stupid piece. It's completely comic. It's not dark or depressing like the last one. It's very, it's comic. I mean, I would say there's an Italian word, scherzando, which means joking. But my wife, she's a pianist. She's a great pianist. She said, look, it's just every time you play it, all I can think of is we have these two cats, okay, a little tandem. And this one of them is a kitten. And he chases the older cat all day and all night. And it sounds like that, you know. That's the piece, basically. And then a flower pot falls and breaks. You know, I mean, she said I can just picture it. That's all I can hear. So anyway, it's up to you to decide, can comedy be profound? I think it can be, but she still thinks it's a stupid piece. So the next one, and I forgot to mention that these are doubly arranged. So Liszt did the initial arrangements, and I decided to play Busoni's version of Liszt's arrangement of Paganini. He added some things. I just like the way it sounds. So in that one, Busoni didn't change it too much, but he did add a few things that Liszt did not. So the next one, Busoni substantially changed. And this is a famous one, and it's very crazy. And yeah, I need your prayers. So this is called La Campanella by Paganini, arranged by Liszt in the Busoni version. So if you've heard it, you may not have heard this Busoni version. It's a little less played than the original. So this is based on a movement from one of the violin concertos by Paganini. And the subject of this piece is a little bell. And you could hear this little bell sound in the upper register of the piano all the time. It's like a recurring idea throughout this piece. It also reminds me a little bit of like does this thing come down? Yeah, that's great. A little more space. Like a buzzing mosquito or bee in your ear, but not quite in your ear. You know what I mean? This piece has that feeling to it. So I guess I think of that because it's summertime and it's happened too many times. I hope you don't have that experience. Okay, but here's La Campanella by Paganini - Liszt - Busoni. It's a moment. Thank you. I really need water now, so. From here on out, I promise that the pieces I will play are more sedate. That's about as unsedated as you can be. That piece is truly insane. I think that opened this. So,
There were certain passages that reminded me of the Calliope at the fair.
of the what, sorry?
The Calliope.
Oh yeah, at the fair. Yeah, that's a good image. You know, I like to think of music in these images or sounds that we know, because I think that this word classical music, I don't want to go on a rant here, but it tends to feel very far from us, in that these composers lived so long ago and we imagine them as statues. But they were not, they were people too. And life changes, but not all that much. And in other words, I think it's the things, if we can connect music, this music, to ordinary things in life, I think then we're making the right connection. I don't know if that makes sense. Long rant. I have something there to write about one day. But anyways, now I'm going to play these salon pieces, essentially. These are still violin pieces, but they're shorter and more sedate. So I'm going to play a piece by Gabriel Fauré now. It's called Après un rêve, French speakers here, After a Dream. And it's originally a song for the voice. Of course, I don't sing in French, so you can be grateful for that. But it's played on the violin and the cello very often as a short piece, as sort of an encore sometimes. And the Australian composer-pianist Percy Grainger arranged this for solo piano. It's a beautiful arrangement. Percy Grainger was wasn't the best person. You can look it up, I won't say more, but he left some nice music. Anyway, this is the Fauré. Fauré, it's interesting that his dates sort of coincide with early Impressionism in painting. And I hear his music in that sense, like Renoir or Monet, I imagine it. People usually pair Debussy with that period. I will play some Debussy, a short piece later. But Debussy lived a little later in the 20th century. I think Debussy was more of an early modernist, but that's a different topic. So, yeah, this is the Fauré. What makes it sound French? I don't exactly know, but I do feel that there are these effects that he uses, like something like this. Here's another one, which just sounds very hazy, like the sky in Paris, or like the sauce in French food. It's all about the sauce, and that to me right there is the musical sauce, if you will. So, I don't know. It's très français. So I have a few more things. You just kick me out when it's time, because I tend to go on and on. Next is a British piece, British composer, Sir Edward Elgar, who is so great, love him. And this is the Salut d'Amour. It's a very famous piece. It's a violin piece that he himself arranged for solo piano, I believe for cash. Well, this is what composers did. They would often arrange their own pieces into a different format to sell more copies. But nevertheless, that sounds cynical to say that. It's a beautiful arrangement, so it works beautifully. He wrote this for his fiancée in the 1860s or 70s, in that period there. British music gets a lot of criticism. My very Russian piano teacher hated English music and art. He said, well, I think he quoted, it was Aaron Copland who said Copland heard Vaughan Williams' Symphony No. 5. Vaughan Williams was another British composer who I adore. And Copland said that the effect of listening to this piece was like standing in a field staring at a cow for half an hour. So, luckily, that's what I was saying, that composers are people too. And it's a good thing musicians don't insult each other like that today. No, I'm kidding, that's not true. They do sometimes. But here's the Elgar, the Salut d'Amour. It means love's greeting. And yeah, Sir Edward Elgar. If you look him up, he had this wonderful handlebar mustache. I don't know how he did it. I guess wax, but kind of, I guess people. And so did Fauré, by the way, and Nietzsche. They all had it. Okay. I have a couple more here, and then we'll call it a day. This is, what am I going to do next? Okay, I'll play Debussy next. So I talked about Fauré a little bit. So he was late 19th century. This is more early 20th century. Claude Debussy. And this is one of the preludes. It's actually, this is the only, so far, only solo actual piano piece I'm playing. Those were all violin pieces. Oh, is everything?
That's okay. Back up to the yeah. We're sorry we those things. Yeah, we're gonna get you this in this chair. Yeah, we're gonna have to, and you'll be better off. There you go, buddy. You're in. Okay. I'm sorry.
That's the space there.
I'm gonna turn you around so you can watch. Yeah. Yeah, that's okay. Okay, bro? Good.
Good.
Has your music ever been like that for art?
I'm sorry?
Has your music ever been like that for art?
Oh, no. This is the first time.
I was making a joke.
Yeah, I know. I got it. Sorry, I was just a little bit. All right, well, I think everything's all right. So this is Claude Debussy, and this very short piece, it's one of the piano preludes, and it's called The Girl with the Flaxen Hair, or translation, Blondie. And I mean, in the colloquial, yeah. And it's about the Debussy wrote it for this woman. Well, he was French, I'll say this. It wasn't his wife, and she was a soprano singer, and yeah, he wrote it for her. Apparently she had blonde hair. And I played this once somewhere recently in Raleigh, and a lady came up to me and said, the girl with the flaxen hair was my grandmother. So, small world, right? And then I was extra worried if I had done it justice, you know. But here it is, and I think that the difference between Fauré and Debussy's style is that, well, this is not one of the crazier Debussy pieces. It's one of the more listenable ones. They're all listenable, but Debussy would do all these, you know, all these crazy things. But Fauré was a professor at the Paris Conservatory, and everything he does, no matter how odd it might sound, it fits into academic composing. Debussy does not. When he was a student, he mocked people like Fauré. I don't even think Fauré liked him very much, if I'm not mistaken. And Debussy was sort of a free spirit. So here is The Girl with the Flaxen Hair by Debussy. Oh, and why is this on the violin program? Because violinists like Jascha Heifetz and Ivry Gitlis always play this as a violin piece. So it counts, I guess, for this program. Even though it's a piano piece. have time for a couple more? It's almost 5, so if I can go a little over, I don't know. When does dinner start? I don't want to. 5:30. Okay, so you won't be late. That's good. I would be very ashamed if I was making you late to eat. Music is great, but food is, let's be honest. Food's better. I'm kidding. It's all good. So now I'm going to play a piece. This is by Fritz Kreisler, the violinist, great violin composer and great man as well. Fritz Kreisler wrote this Liebeslied. It's called Love's Sorrow in German. He was originally Viennese, and he was Jewish. He escaped the Nazis in the 30s and came to live in New York. And to give you a picture, I may have played this before here. I played it a few years ago, and then I stopped, and now I've brought it back, maybe too recently. So we're just going to try it and see. But anyway, Kreisler, he was a great person. He didn't like to practice, I'll tell you that. He would sit in Central Park and just stare at the trees and talk to people. He was a wonderful man, and you can hear that in his recordings. His warmth shows in his sound on the violin. This was arranged by his friend and musical collaborator, Sergei Rachmaninoff. So I have a few stories here to give you an idea of what Rachmaninoff was like. Well, if Kreisler was a short, skinny guy with a handlebar mustache from Vienna, Rachmaninoff was 6.5 feet tall. He was Russian. He had a shaved head. So he was, Stravinsky said he looked like someone said he looked like an escaped convict. Okay. My grandfather, so my mother's from Russia originally. She's very happy to be out, of course. Now, my goodness, what's going on now? Unspeakable. So, but my father's side of the family is from Southeast Virginia, going back many, many, many generations. So I tell people I'm half redneck, half Russian. It's easy to remember. Yeah. So, and both like to tell long stories that never end. So forgive me. But my grandfather, on my father's side, the American grandfather, he was in dental school in Richmond, Virginia in the 1930s. And he worked as an usher at this concert series. And Rachmaninoff was giving a recital there. Can you believe it? I would give my left leg to go back in time and hear. And so he was backstage, and he was told not to let anyone through this set of doors. So he said, okay. Well, 5 minutes later, someone tried to open the door. So my grandfather pushed back, and this person pushed back, and there was a little tug of war. And then suddenly, wham, the door was kicked open, and it's Rachmaninoff. And I tell people I have a personal connection with the composer, because you know what he said to my grandfather? He said, "Get out of my way." So I have a personal connection to Rachmaninoff. So just that gives you an idea. So the story with Rachmaninoff and Kreisler was they were playing together in Carnegie Hall. And Fritz Kreisler got lost in the piece. He had a memory problem because he didn't practice. And Rachmaninoff's playing, and Kreisler is just improvising. And he walks over to Rachmaninoff during the concert, and he whispers, "Where are we?" And Rachmaninoff, with a straight face, he keeps playing. He says, "Carnegie Hall." So this is Rachmaninoff's loving arrangement tribute to the Liebeslied by Fritz Kreisler. It's a waltz, but it's a Viennese waltz. A Viennese waltz is a little tipsy, It's not. That's a regular waltz, but it's it's got a little lilt to it. That's a Viennese waltz too. So, yeah. But Love's Sorrow. I don't think there's a piece in the world that captures sadness and joy at the same time, somehow. Music can do that somehow, and this piece especially. I will play one more piece, and if you want to stay, I can play some Southern gospel after, if you like. I'd play some of that too. But up to you to do one or two. Anyway, this is a short piece. It's called the Serenade Espagnole by Cécile Chaminade. You don't hear her too much. We should hear more of her music. She was a French composer who lived at the same time, the late 19th century, early 20th century, and she was very prolific. And this piece is originally a song for voice. Like I said, I don't sing in French. I could try, but you wouldn't want to hear it. And, Fritz Kreisler, who we just heard, he actually arranged this piece for the violin. And it was so successful that Chaminade decided that she would write a version for solo piano. And that's what I'm going to play. Again, it's very short, so if it's all right if I play one more? Okay, thanks. I don't want to overstay my welcome, that's called being a bad guest, Anyway, my cats tend to do that where I sleep. But anyway, so this piece, it's very Spanish, and what's interesting is French composers love Spanish music. Debussy wrote a piece called La Puerta del Vino, which is, that's not how it goes, I forgot, but it's a Spanish piece, and he never even went to Spain. He was like in a harbor in Spain for like 30 minutes, but he never was actually in Spain. Bizet wrote Carmen. Bizet was French. Carmen, how Spanish can you get? That's not to diminish people like Albéniz and De Falla and Turina, who were Spanish composers writing Spanish music. But there's this obsession. I think of it a little bit like the way American composers and jazz musicians like to borrow from Latin American music. That's also south of the border, Spain is south of the border from France. So I didn't mention Ravel though, because Ravel, he was a French composer, but his first language was actually Spanish. He was a Gascon, which I think is very interesting. But again, I'm rambling again. So here's the Serenade Espagnole by Cécile Chaminade. And one more thing is, so Spanish music, it has this flamenco thing in it, which comes from the history of Spain, that for hundreds of years Spain was Arabic. I mean, the Moors lived there, and that music permeates Spanish music and architecture, and especially in the very south of Spain. So it's a fascinating culture and place. I've managed to go there a couple times, and it was great. So. Sorry, something didn't click. Okay. One more time. gospel? One or two? Yeah. So I don't sing, I just play, you know. Have you ever heard, I did not grow up Pentecostal at all. Far from it. But Pentecostal church music is quite something. And I thought I might attempt to play some of it. I've been working on it, seeing if I can do it. So what the thing is about this style is that it's going to sound like either boogie woogie or rock and roll, but it's not. It came before that, you know. It's almost like it was the people like Mahalia Jackson or Jerry Lee Lewis or something. They took it from the church context. So this is just a medley of Pentecostal things like Jesus on the Main Line. It's an old song. And I'll do my best. I don't know. I mean, a half Russian kid from New Jersey. I don't know. Yeah. I did not grow up in the South, but I try to, you know. I do more next time. I could do more of that too. So just save for later. Thank you so much for coming. Очень пожалуйста. I speak a little, but not enough. Great. Have a great rest of the day and.